roupa, porque no fim eu sei que vou tirar. Fala tchau pro seu batom na boca e fala oi pra quem te faz pirar. Se você já tá com a mesma sensação, pode vir, gente, que eu dou um bugão. Tá descontrolada toda essa cara e não para porque a coisa ficou mara. Vou te ganhar no cansaço, no cansaço, no cansaço. Vamos fazer um regaço, um regaço, um regaço. Colarinha dos amassos, amassos, amassos. Vamos fazer um regaço, um regaço, um regaço. Rafa Gomes, digam no beat. Não perde tempo escolhendo a roupa, porque no fim eu sei que vou tirar. Fala tchau pro seu batom na boca e fala oi pra quem te faz pirar. Se você já tá com a mesma sensação, pode vir, gente, que eu dou um bugão. Tá descontrolada toda essa tara e não para porque a coisa ficou mara. Vou te ganhar no cansaço, no cansaço, no cansaço. Vamos fazer um regaço, um regaço, um regaço. Rolar em altos amassos, amassos, amassos. Vamos fazer um regaço, um regaço, um regaço. Vou te ganhar no cansaço, no cansaço, no cansaço. Vamos fazer um regaço, um regaço, um regaço. Rolar em altos amassos, amassos, amassos. Vamos fazer um regaço, um regaço.
The views, opinions, and representations expressed on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network and its website are those of the hosts, guests, and participants, and are not necessarily those of or endorsed by the network, its affiliated stations and broadcasts, the management, other hosts, or advertisers of the network. The shows found on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network can, but do not necessarily, promote any particular lifestyle, belief, religion, political affiliation, or other personal practice. These shows are for entertainment purposes only, and are not intended to treat, diagnose, and/or claim any cure of disease or condition, or give any medical or legal advice. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, from our compound to you worldwide, with your host, Gary Anderson.
Well, good evening or morning, depending on your time zone, from the Pacific to the Atlantic to worldwide. This is Gary on Night Dreams Talk Radio. Tonight, you want to get yourself a nice cup of hot java, like always, and maybe some hot cocoa. Find a nice, comfortable chair, because we have Bruce-Maccabee on tonight. We're going to be talking about UFOs and what got him involved in UFOs. He'll be on right after this.
Please check out the Night Dreams Talk Radio website at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. Also, if you want to keep our show free of advertising, just hit the donate button. Give a buck or two. Remember, all prior shows are always free to listen to. We at Night Dreams Talk Radio thank you for your support.
You're listening to my friend Gary Anderson on Night Dreams Talk Radio, the best in paranormal radio.
Well, John, I keep telling you, maybe not the best, but we're certainly not the worst. Tonight we got Bruce-Maccabee on. Hey, Bruce, how you doing, my friend?
Well, not too bad. After all, I'm the best.
Well, I can guarantee you I'm not.
I'm on the best or something.
Yeah, I don't know. John Clay keeps saying I'm the best, but I don't believe it. Anyway, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about you? What got you? And the main thing I want to find out, How did you get involved in with the Navy?
Well, I got involved with the Navy when I went to work for the Navy in 1972 and did work at a Navy laboratory for 26 years, retiring in 2008. And that's how I got involved in the Navy. Probably more interested in how I got involved with UFOs.
Well, did the Navy kind of set you up at all for UFOs or anything when you were...
No, the Navy did nothing with respect to UFOs. The Navy paid me to do work and kept me alive, I guess.
Okay. Well, I guess, good employment does help.
But none of my Navy work had anything to do with UFOs.
What then got you, Bruce, involved in UFOs?
Well, my memory goes way back to the early 50s when there were lots of movies and stuff at that time. UFOs sort of started in 1947 with a big flap of sightings that included the Roswell case and Kenneth Arnold and so on. And then after 1947, there was a continual flow of UFO sightings, more or less, each year. And I remember at age 10 approximately in 1952, 53 time frame, the day the Earth stood still and the War of the Worlds and all these movies and reading occasionally in newspapers about people seeing weird things in the sky, but I didn't really take any particular pay any particular attention to the subject until when I was in my senior year. I had a list of I had to read 10 books or something like that to get through English class. And, so I read a book called The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects by Captain Edward J. Ruppelt, who was the first head of Project Blue Book. And all I can say about that is that I was someone who didn't have any background at all on what the guy was talking about. But I could see that when you get to the end of the book, that if he was sitting on a fence, to take a feather to blow him off and knock him off into the extraterrestrial side of the fence. Anyway, at that point, I basically wrote a little note about my impressions of the book and then forgot about the subject for about 10 years. Roughly 10 years later, or 8 or 9 years later, there was a flap of sightings in Michigan and area that attracted national attention when General Ford, who was the minority leader of the House, asked the Air Force to have an investigation of the subject that was independent of Project Blue Book. And at that point, 1967, 66, 67, it became almost legitimate to talk about the UFO subject without having a bag over your head. But then after they investigated, supposedly for about 2 years, a year and a half, the final report of this report, known as the Condon Report, named after the guy who ran the project, concluded that there was nothing to it, basically, and the Air Force wouldn't learn anything by continuing investigation, so they closed Project Blue Book in 69. By that time, however, I was somewhat hooked in the subject. I had been going to American University in Washington, D.C., which it turned out was not very far, just up the hill from the headquarters of the National Investigating Committee on Aerial Phenomena, called NICAP, which was the largest civilian organization in the mid-'60s, the largest civilian organization paying attention to investigating UFO sightings. And I went to the headquarters of NICAP and volunteered to do basic work, office work, to help them analyze cases. And I figured if there was any place that there was good data to make a decision as to whether or not these things are real, NICAP had it. So anyway, I went there and I did some work, and then went on some case investigations in the Washington, D.C. area in the late 60s, early 70s. And finally, after the Condon Report was published in late 69, there was sort of a general feeling in the press and so on that they had solved the problem of UFOs. Mainly, there weren't any. It's all explainable, and it was sort of a general feeling that UFOs were dead. Those of us who were in UFO groups knew that the sighting continued, but they weren't appearing in the press anymore like they had for the 1965, 66, 67, 68 time frame. Anyway, we knew that the sightings were still going on. And then in the summer of 73, it was a big case of we're back, when all of a sudden in the late summer there was a big flap of sightings with some major events that occurred, sightings that really stuck out, like the Larry Coyne helicopter case. A bunch of Army guys in a helicopter who had a sighting as this thing went over their head, and the so-called Hickson Parker abduction on the shores of the Pascagoula River. Mr. Parker has recently come out with a book on that, finally talking about it after all these years. So anyway, I started doing my own investigations in 1973 and 74, and took on some cases, including the Trent photo case, which was the only photo case endorsed by the guy who was analyzing UFO photos for the Common Report. And I studied that, and I studied sightings by the astronauts and a number of others. And since then, I've been involved with some major UFO sightings, like the New Zealand sightings in December of 1978, where for the first time you had everything put together, multiple witnesses on an airplane, a co-pilot, and a news crew that was able to take color movie film of these things, plus tape recordings at the time, and radar detections by ground radar as well as air radar on the airplane. So that was pretty convincing that there was something really going on. And I got involved with studying the history of the subject. I was the first person to get the FBI file in 1977, the FBI file. I didn't know they had any UFOs, and there wasn't any historical background for historically documented reason for believing that the FBI would have had anything at all. But it just so happens, because I was looking at the Trent photo case and discussing this case with the Trents themselves, I found out that Mr. Trent had told another investigator that the FBI had come to where he worked to interrogate him. This was in 1950, June of 1950, that Mr. Trent was interviewed by the FBI. So I wrote a letter to the FBI on the off chance that they might have something on Trent and might be willing to tell me. This was a couple of years after the Freedom of Information Act became available in 1975. When that became available, you could write to government organizations and ask for information. They might not give it to you, but at least you could ask. Well, so I got a message from a FBI agent who was handling my request in 1977, and he said they didn't have anything on Trent, but they did have a bunch of stuff, 1,600 pages of stuff related to UFOs.
That's
so
a
I got
lot.
that, and that was the first major governmental release of information other than the Air Force putting Project Blue Book files available. When I got the FBI file, and I started doing historical investigation, studying Air Force documents, government documents going back into the 1940s, and wrote about it and published a number of papers. I was involved in the 1986 Japan Airlines jumbo jet case flying over Alaska that has become popular in the press in the last 10 years. And I was involved with the Gulf Breeze sightings that started in 1987 and lasted for about 10 years. And I kept up on since then. I just today learned that, it's been known for a couple of weeks that the Navy has now set up making